All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is the first of a new series we're doing with the Wipro Chief Data and Analytics Officer Council. And in this podcast format, I've enjoyed it. I've invited a few clients to join with selected speakers about once a month or so to ask questions, share their experience, and really engage directly. We're also going to be editing this into small topic reels so that it can be shared on the council website and reviewed later, along with transcript and a white paper. Let me go ahead and just share a few thoughts about the way we'd like to run the council. And then I'd like to have Tom talk about himself and his journal and engage with conversation of all of you on the call. What's your biggest I told you so that came true in 2024? I know it's a complicated question, but I'm curious if anybody wants to chime in. And I'm sure it's going to be AI related, but it could be something entirely cultural. So, Tom, I'm going to give you a chance to start, but I'm going to have you formally introduce yourself in a second. Then I'd be curious, Jeff, if you also have any comments, and I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be on to be a part of this, and thanks for having me along. So, as you're explaining, I'm Tom. I run and founded AI Journal, so we're on quite a bit of a wild ride at the moment through the past couple of years. Some peaks and troughs and highs and lows of building what we're for the next stage of what we're building. I'm excited to talk about some of those pointers today with you, James, and all the people that have kindly given their time to join us. I think my biggest I told you so prediction, it wasn't really so much of a prediction, but it was more around the amount of use cases we were going to see. I really view this year as like the year of implementation. And I mean, it kind of sounds like common sense, but I think I nearly had a moment with the F1 as you're explaining if Norris was going to win it, but specifically with AI and technology, I think it's really what I thought it would be, which is the scale at which people would start using it, especially around small businesses. And I also think what my view was on small creators, similar to what I'm seeing now with small businesses, they were really the ones that have wowed and shocked a lot of people, especially we're in the creator scene. We're a small creative in certain aspects, and I think that's a big moment where I really it wasn't so much a prediction, but I could kind of see it happening, how I was going to give to individual creators over the traditional kind of media and traditional kind of areas. And I think we're seeing the same with businesses as well, alongside creators, especially for next year again.
For me, I think the biggest I got that wrong about 2024 was I expected we would begin to see not only solid use cases, which we have, but real reductions in headcount because of AI. I'm kind of getting the impression, and Tom, I really want your thoughts on this, and Jay and Tanu, as we move into the next 45 minutes. I'm getting the impression in some ways, it reminds me of when, and I'm old enough to remember when PCs came along and there was Harvard Graphics and then there was PowerPoint. And what used to be a very expensive multi-$1,000 to pay someone for a professional deck, you could now do it at your desk. And rather than changing the world, what it really did was everyone did the same thing, but it looked better. I'm getting the sense that we're keeping the same jobs, but everyone is expected to have, better writing, better graphics, and better images. But we haven't really eliminated a complete class of employee yet. And that's both good and bad. I'm a student of history. In the long run, these disruptions are what provide the labor pool for the next wave of innovation. But in the short run, they do cause huge disruption. But I haven't really heard of anybody laying off 2,000, call center employees because of Gen AI. But they seem to be making better calls. So we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper because I'm not sure that I can see cases where that's happened. So finding out what topics are being covered is, to me, one of the most interesting things about your journal. You and I talked about that a little bit before we joined this call. So tell me a little bit about how you form the journal and how you pick your topics, how you pick your authors, and just run with it. And then I'm going to jump in with a little bit of history.
Yeah, awesome. It was a real interesting time when we there's a lot of things that I've learned personally just building this platform, and we're still building it today. Like at the moment, we're doing a massive shift to reorganize it to more of a to have a data intelligence feature and include more community kind of aspects and bring people into
Yeah.
conversations more, because it was the one part we're missing. But my journey, I think, began properly when I got into this stuff. Was I was working at an engineering company, so I was doing a lot of things for on projects for customers like Greg's, Coca-Cola, Hermes, DPD, Amazon, all those kind of big manufacturers. And I was really struggling to find a way or a channel to talk about these things. And just being the way that I am, I just thought, well, I'll create something and see where it goes. And I've always kind of had the view that I'm not going to be the expert on all these different topics. I'm not going to be the person that's in the driver's seat. I'm not going to be the person in the trenches doing all these initiatives and use cases. And that's where we really brought in the contributor model from day one, really. And it was more me just asking people. And now we've built up a real great audience and great number of contributors, upwards of 750 over the past 3 or 4 years to build on those expertise, to build on what people are thinking and seeing. Yeah, it's been a lot of change, especially through, I think 2022 is the year where I saw the biggest change and the biggest kind of impact from a business. Last year, strangely, wasn't the biggest year in terms of, I mean, it was a big year for AI. It's a very strange thing to explain though, because it was just so into the open, and a lot of people that normally wouldn't bat an eyelid about this topic in 2022 were now
Yeah.
coming to me about conversations. And I found myself in conversations in rooms, in C-suite conversations, to people that I was having coffee with about the wildest topics I just never thought that were just completely new to me. Whereas this year, I feel the pressure's kind of off those conversations, and it's much more the rooms we get into, the conferences we go to. We go to various different, we try and go to as many as we can and have meetings off the back of them. And I think you guys will all know this. It's really what's the next viable step with the business we have and how to serve a customer. And that seems like a very
Yeah.
key trend at the moment, or key theme that people want to know about. So I think it's not what people expect. 2022 was actually a year where we saw the most demand, and last year I think the demand was there, or the conversations were there, but it was just in ways I hadn't seen before. There was just conversations I didn't know the answers to, and I didn't. It was just more curious. It was much more different. And this year it's been much more implementation, use cases, like to your point earlier, properly investigating things like data governance, data strategy, data integrity. Those seem to be big things. Security being a number one agenda item, for reasons such as getting breached, or you've got emerging technologies like quantum computing. Like I was at the quantum computing summit a few months ago, and to see what these businesses, whether it's banks or whether it's commercial applications or consumer good businesses, it's really fascinating. It's not what I'd have expected. And probably to your first question, there's a lot of got it wrong moments
Yeah.
in there for 2024, where it's where the people I'm speaking to, they come out with things and said things I would just never expect for the way I saw AI going in 2022 to how I see it going now, and especially going into 2025. I think you were mentioning it, or someone was, about what's going to happen on policy side, especially in the States, where about 60, it depends on what platform we're on, but anywhere from 38% to 75% of our audience come from the US. So that's a real key indicator for us to understand trends. But I'm going off on a bit of a whim, but there's some real different conversations that are happening now that I would never expected.
So let me jump back just a moment though. I'm curious, in 2022 when you saw the pivot, was that around the Gen AI, the Chat GPT? Because the growth of that, I believe they set a record for the number of, new subscribers and all that. It's a fascinating case study. So I'm curious if that was the inflection point for you, or if you were building up slow and steady.
Uh, I don't think it's a good point. 2023 was when I was having conversations, like to your point, with people I'd never expect to have those conversations with about what AI can do, and people from property coming to speak to us, people from airlines, people from oil and gas, all sorts of industries that I'd never been in a conversation with before, asking just general curious questions. The biggest trend I was seeing through 2022 was as soon as people started getting a whim that ChatGPT was going to be coming onto the scene and Google were releasing things. I mean, it was much more Chinese whispers, if anything. It wasn't like anything confirmed. I remember in March,
Yeah.
April, May of 2022, of what was potentially being built. A lot of the focus was actually on cloud, and I don't know why, but a lot of conversation I was having was about cloud and
Yeah.
infrastructure and being kind of scalable ready. And I remember those were big conversations back in 2022. But it's I think really ChatGPT took a lot by storm and the following large language models. So there was a lot of noise to chat to people that were just curious. We're just generally, what should I do? What product should I build? What tools should be available? And there weren't that many tools. I mean, there was a lot of startups last year. And I mean, maybe that's part of the layoffs you've seen this year. And the start of 2023 in January, I remember, was a bad year for layoffs. But the amount of new tools that were coming, and there's a argument to do, or there's a idea with the amount of funding that was going around in 2022
Yeah.
and 2023 because of it, which I don't really have a position on, but it kind of intrigues me to look at it. To how many tools there are now, like I think um, there's a lot more valid tools today that I would go use and why they're using it. But I mean, I haven't really seen Agentforce by Salesforce is probably the biggest tool I've seen released. And that's taken a good couple of years to properly check and use. And I don't even think it's fully deployed yet. I think it's coming out in stages to select customers. And obviously they're doing all the marketing around it. But I think next year we're going to see all the proper tools and use cases, and I think people are using them more and more compared to 2023. It was just a lot of conversation, and I think this year is the year where it's settled down a bit. But next year is going to be an even bigger year. Next year, I'm convinced will be probably with what's happening in the US, one of the biggest turnaround years we've seen with AI. Like you will see a lot of money going for investments, businesses buying, all sorts of things that I don't want to predict because nothing's guaranteed, but it looks a
Yeah.
very healthy
Yeah.
year next year. Very healthy.
Yeah, so it's interesting these conversations you had, the range of industries, oil and gas and that sort of thing. I mean, we all know that AI is big in other fields, but when you had those, was it somebody on the data side saying, "Hey, my company really wants to know whether we can use it to reduce and, I don't know, discovery cost or improve flow or optimize this or, get rid of data scientists?" Or was it business people saying, "Wow, it changes everything now that it can see, feel, and listen, can we use it to run our business? Whether it's, manufacturing, oil exploration, whatever,
Yeah.
content generation." Hey, are you talking to data people who want to be relevant, or
Mm.
are you talking to business people who basically don't care about the data people? If they need them, fine. If they don't, if they can do it directly.
So I think if you're any businesses that is making themselves future proof, and I was talking to this point with AMD, which is a live public video that I'd
Yeah.
encourage you to check out around data centers and what they're seeing. Um, but I think every business that's trying to make them future proof understands the importance of data and data scientists and data developers and chief data officers. And I think even with the companies that have unfortunately, like who was it, Dell, who laid off 12,000 salespeople, they were still taking that money and reinvesting it into more infrastructure. And there's plenty of examples of companies doing that through the past 12 months. But what we've seen, like to your points around, and mainly we speak to directors of departments. I mean, we do surveys of chief data officers and all sorts of
Yeah.
heads of compliance and people that look at these things. But Shell, for example, they've used a public thing where they've used AI for predictive maintenance in oil rigs, so you can understand the downtime that's needed. So, and I was at Saudi Arabia to see one of the conferences and the robotics, so like using Boston Dynamics and their competitors, how you can use that for safety. So
Yeah.
you can do scanning, you can understand, and it's much more safe because you haven't got the potential of risk to a human or injury or any of that. So they can spot all those things, and they can get into very tight spaces. So they can get into places that are radioactive, they can get into places that are dangerous, and you can do a lot of sensing, you can do a lot of analytics. Or with Domino's, so the pizza chain, they're using it, that you might have noticed, I think at the beginning of this year or toward the end of last year. You can do voice ordering, and you can do delivery optimization, so you can understand exactly where to do things. And I mean, there's businesses like Experian that understand and can map places, so businesses know exactly where they need to put a store, know exactly where they need to put a delivery center, know exactly where they need to do all these things. Or you look at the big technology companies like IBM for oncology, and looking at all the healthcare things. And there's a brilliant book, AI 2041, which really goes into all these different examples that I'd recommend reading. And it's the best book, because it's basically a novel about the technology and then an analysis by Kai Fu and the other author, names escape me, for what they explain that technology, whether it's predictive analytics or different things. But I mean, you look at tools like Copilot, large language models, or how Salesforce is using Agentforce, or you look at any kind of end use. Yeah. There's all these ways where there's a lot of vision and concept ideas that are becoming very real, and you might not see them as being real. Then overnight, they're very, very real. Like, they're just implemented like that. And I think that's how technology works. You get these big gate or these big ideas, but everyone knows you didn't build Rome in a day. It takes a little bit of time to understand them rolling out. So I think there's a lot of use cases I'm seeing, and I think a lot of people, it's not that they're not spending money, it's that they're shifting that spend to R&D and to different things, like data understanding, or NLP is a big one for natural speech, natural language. A lot of it is just basic ideas that a customer wants something faster, and what have they got to do on the back end to make it faster. But I don't think there's job losses. I just see them as restructuring almost. But there's a lot of exciting things happening, especially that one with IBM I mentioned about oncology, and what science companies are doing with proteins and treatments and new medicines. It's a really mind-boggling kind of situation.
I would make a note. It's actually been a year. It was December a year ago that I reconvened the council to talk about Gen AI. And I was disappointed, actually, that almost every use case, with one exception, was yes, we have a better chatbot, or yes, we use it for document summary. And those are terrific use cases. But again, that assumes that you keep the same job, same person, but it's sort of like PowerPoint gives you better graphics instead of hiring an artist. But it's the same output. It just looks better. A year later, and we're going to get into this, I still haven't really seen where a complete business process has been replaced by Gen AI, such as writing a will, preparing documents for a merger, that sort of thing. Yeah, that reminds me, I started an AI practice about 10 years ago with a consulting firm. And at that time, we did a taxonomy of the use cases. One was, which was rare, but the stuff that made the news, things you literally could not do without AI. That did, for example, that was so fast, the response was so fast, self-driving cars, some kind of, medical automation and things like that. The other was where you could do it with people, but it was just cheaper and faster with AI. And the third was people were using AI and solving problems, then nobody even knew it. So I'm hearing a little bit of all three of those here. But that data context and documentation is really interesting, because at least among the CDO audience, that and the ability to generate SQL code and the like. My biggest single surprise when ChatGPT came out is I knew about the earlier versions, because I read The Economist and I'm in that space. So I knew the early versions, like in 1980, I'm sorry, in 2021 and the like. But I didn't realize that the language it knew could convert from, SAS into R. And suddenly, 95% of your SAS queries could be run at a fraction of the price without the license cost. That to me was a revelation. I had no idea that it was that precise. And we had another CDO on a recent council saying that he produces data models in like an hour that would have taken a week. And now with Gen AI, that stuff is routine, millisecond type activity. So that entire class of business seems to have disappeared. Um, but anyway, and I always thought that had a lot of promise. Tom, we've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm also curious about you mentioned the topics. Do you measure the engagement by topic? Like, are you seeing that people are interested more in Gen AI or interested more in ethics? And I'm going to talk about ethics before we get into your predictions for the coming 5 years.
So we do a lot of things to understand why people want to write about certain topics. I mean, we run surveys all the time and a lot of more in-depth kind of analysis pieces to understand and do a lot of research and reports and stuff. But I mean, mainly people want to know, the big thing people are always asking us for are use cases. Like, it really is what people want to know about,
Yeah.
because it's very hard to explain how something works in a 5 minute article. I mean, you can explain the very basics of like what percentage outputs and everything, but it is
Yeah.
extremely hard to just how I think media's changed. Like, to get a segment on Sky News or some traditional outlet and they bring an expert on for 5 minutes, it's not long enough. Like, you need to listen to them for an hour, 2 hours. I really understand what are they going into, why do they do something. What's, like, to your points you were just mentioning then, how do you optimize a database, or how do you make sure you've got the right data coming in, or whatever it might be, whatever topic you're on about. And I think a lot of people, the surprising one is most people want to talk about around data, like all different types of things, like data cleanliness, data optimization, data governance is a big thing. Ethical AI in terms, I mean, there's a lot of conversations that we've been brought into around regulation, because here in Europe, it's with the EU AI Act, it was a very big topic, and
Yeah.
a lot of people didn't necessarily agree with it. And I think there's always topics on there that surprise me from the way people want to talk around. But it's not always the technical things. A lot of it is the biggest thing that people look for to us, and the solution we're trying to build, like with the updates to the data intelligence platform we're building for companies, is to see exactly how use cases can be formed and to really help them with that kind of strategy piece of. It doesn't always need to be really technical and complicated. You can go find the technical people to do those things. But a lot of it, because a lot of our audience are senior managers and directors and C-suite, 58% of them, it's the topics are much more focused on what can, to your point, what can Gen AI bring, but what are the parts that are in the nitty gritty to really understand. And I mean, that's where we're really trying to encourage more longer form articles or something you might see in a journal, like a proper research paper, because that's where you can understand exactly how models are built. You can understand. I mean, they're massive. Like, try and read one research paper released once every 2 weeks or once a month, something like that. And those are the ones where you can properly understand a technology or a guiding point for an industry, or if you're working with a
Yeah.
customer, what exactly we need to put in. But they're shifting so much, and it's shifted a lot since 2022. 2022 was very vanilla flavored. It was very top level, kind of what is AI, give us the breakdowns of what it can be used in. And now we're getting a very clear from our contributors and businesses that write on the platform, show exactly or want to see exactly how a product was placed, from anything from the marketing and sales side. How do you communicate it? Because that is the biggest problem I think every business has got at the moment, and it's something my friend Chris Branch talks about. Brilliant guy. And they do a lot of Gen AI work. They create a lot of imagery, and the biggest problem is that no one can tell a story with it, and it's very hard to sell something if, like I always say, people don't like being sold to, but they love to buy things. And if you can, I think that is a big problem with data, and especially with security. They go hand in hand, and I think that's where the best companies are telling the best stories. It seems really simple, but it's at the end of the day, with more tech people, when you speak to people that are selling home equipment or selling travel or selling holidays or selling some of the biggest businesses in the world, they just want to know, can we service our customers better and we can do things better? And I think there is a real problem with that communication side from a vendor to a enterprise or a private business or any of those kind of things. So yeah, it's the biggest challenge we've had, because we've seen an uptake in customer focused businesses, so B2C customers, much more than we have, whether that's a drinks brand or IKEA or like I keep saying, a travel company or an aviation company, much more than we have with vendors, because they're the ones that are really searching for who do we go to, who do we trust. And that's another big thing with ethics, because so many are popping up. It's why companies like Vanta are so good, because they can make them approved and secure to go work with those bigger businesses, where I think there's a lot of problems at the moment. You generally only want to go work with the bigger players, or the more in line, the more ones that have been around for more, because the small businesses, there's a lot of issues that are starting to come out with data privacy and data integrity and where you're using it and selling that data, and that is big issue that I don't think will ever go away. And as much as a startup has the advantage, they're quicker and they can make decisions quicker, the bigger companies have the advantage. They've got the money to make sure everything's secure and make sure that they're taking every security risk at the highest degree, which they definitely should be doing. And I mean, that's not an answer, it's just a observation of where next year is going to go, because security seems to be the biggest thing overlapping everything. I mean, if you look at the examples from LastPass in 2019, CrowdStrike this year, the repercussions of those things are they're massive. And startups, that's something like that happens to them, they're done. Like you're gone.
Yeah, that actually ties back to an observation you made early, that one thing that got you into the journal was the fact that, these systems, once they were automated, were highly fragile. A system failure. And, I'm sure all of us have run into it. You go into your coffee shop and it's like, I can't sell you coffee. The computer's down. Like they literally don't even know how to take cash. So we have a very fragile environment that doesn't tell you what's wrong. Do you think when you talk about ethics? Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a comment?
I'm just saying that's a very real problem.
Yeah,
that you're talking about. It's one of the biggest
concerns.
Yeah,
what strikes me about ethics is two layers. One is what was the big topic a few years ago was ethics in the training data. And the example I like to use, which is a real case, is if you feed it the resumes of CEOs and say, find me a similar candidate, you can remove the gender, but it's going to recognize that captain of the football team, Eagle Scout, were attributes of CEOs. There's a bias just in the fact that we've been biased when we've chosen CEOs until the last couple of decades. But then there's also ethics on the application. Should AI be used in military? We probably don't need to discuss that here because none of my clients are military. But should it zoom in on a setting and try to pick out who in the crowd deserves to be hit? I'm curious how often ethics is a data conversation versus an application. Or a social change. Do we have a certain amount of Luddite thinking in a way that people are worried about, 10,000, claims adjusters being laid off in one cut rather than gradually? Anyway, it's an open-ended question. I'd like your thoughts on that. How often is that on your mind personally as a citizen? And how often is it on the mind of your topics, your authors, and your readers?
Ethics is something that will never go away. It's something that's always going to be constantly following. There's always going to be people that don't agree with the way that we're using technology, and there's always going to, and that's a good thing because it highlights a lot of flaws and a lot of problems. And I think there's a lot of worrying cases, some that come out of different countries, like being able to do universal credit and being able to stop you traveling if you don't have a good enough credit score. Or there's things that are worrying, like you said, with claims, and there's things to do with military, like Musk is talking about it at the moment, and Mark Andreessen talked about it, about how military jets won't be piloted anymore. It'll be drones because it's much more safer. You don't have to put a pilot in a risky spot. They're cheaper. They can go faster because you've got no one in them. You can send
higher G's. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All those kind of things. And there's always trade-offs. There's always more problems. I mean, next problem you have with that is, well, what are you going to do with all the super high trained pilots? Like, you're always going to have a knock-on effect. Like, I'm sure you'll find they're very smart people, so you'll find something for them. But it's there's always a knock-on effect. And I think as a citizen, as a person, when I look at things, there's a lot of things that tell me it's not invading my privacy. But really, it is invading my privacy, and it's slowly. But because the benefits so far outweigh handing my data over, I go with the benefits because I want my life to be easier. And before I know it, it could be 5 years' time. I'm like, I'm caught into this cycle of knowing everything. Like Apple know everything about me because I buy every single bloody product they release because they're so
Yeah.
good. It's such a good product to buy. But then because of that, I've had to play the trade off that they know me better than I know myself, and they know conversations I had that I wouldn't be able to remember. And I
But
think there's
is that a feature or a bug, like you say? I mean,
exactly. I
you
wouldn't be
know,
able to say. I wouldn't be able to say it's, they're
yeah.
very good with their marketing, but I think it's a real problem, and I think a lot of businesses, um, it's such a big open-ended question of no, whatever you do that you think is right is never going to be right to someone else or to everyone else. Like someone's going to have a disagreement with it, and someone's going to have a different view on what that technology should be doing, and I really it is the one where I will never get to an answer or get to a definite direction because it's with all these big innovations that are coming, there's always a trade-off. There's never a one, there's never a single good solid answer that will make sense. But I do think businesses that steer away, I mean, we see it in the content world at the moment, like Substack's going through it at the moment. They're trying to turn into a social, or it seems, I don't know, but I'm reading a lot about them because being a creator, me loving all that kind of stuff. It's interesting to watch how a model like that, and that is an ethics thing in turn because they're now basically owning the full relationship where they they brand themselves as giving journalists a platform for information. There's loads of examples, and they're a great platform, by the way. I'm not picking on them; they're a brilliant brand, but all those different things. There's always going to be trade-offs with companies on what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, and people aren't going to like it. I know here in the UK, there's a lot of things around using it in facial recognition. To your point, James, that you can find out who's a criminal and who's not a criminal, what's the chances of them committing a crime, and what's the chances of them not committing a crime. Just because someone has a high chance of committing a crime doesn't mean you can go arrest them. Like it's just
Exactly.
because of
We know
based off
that
that
the
information.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
no,
classic problem. The false positive rate when you have extremely rare situations like detecting a terrorist.
yeah.
You may detect 90% of the terrorists, but you're also detecting a million people who aren't a terrorist.
Yeah, like my
So
brother,
it's been
a good point of this, when we were flying to New York, he got stopped, and my brother, a great business guy, he got stopped because his name matched up to a drug lord of South America somewhere. And here we are coming in from London, and me and John were on a brother's trip, and he got pulled aside and was very quickly moved to investigation room to investigation room. We were waiting him for hours, and they had every right to do it. But get how funny this is. They're asking him all these questions, grilling him, grilling him, grilling him. And then they said, if you can take your top off, we just want to see if your tattoo's still the same. And my brother doesn't have any tattoos. And instantly, all that theory and all that idea of him being the right person
yeah.
have just gone out the window because he doesn't. It's
Actually,
and I don't know how that
it seems
relates to
like
it.
yeah, it seems
But
like it needed AI to first of all start with, the instant
exactly.
disqualifiers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what a real problem is qualifying, disqualifying. One thing can far outweigh all the qualifiers. I mean, there's God knows how many situations where someone wasn't that good at that sport and they become the MVP, like Michael Jordan. He was one of the worst apparently at college, and now he's the person that Nike Jordan for. And there's lots of examples. I'm using that as a very big one, but in AI and ethics, there's going to be a lot of examples where businesses do the wrong thing because they haven't still used their gut feeling or done stuck to their business values. And I think that's a really important thing going forward. A really important thing
Yeah,
to
before we get to
avoid.
predictions for 1 year and 5 year, and then I can have you back in a year and tell you were right or wrong. So one of the things, I don't know if we can solve it in this call, but I'm very interested in the fact that remember when GANs were all the hot news before Gen AI, the generative adversarial, that's how you learn to
Yeah,
play chess better and Go and all that. I've really not seen anybody talking about using generative AI in a GAN format. Why not have the three competing Gen AIs produce citations for a lawsuit, and then check to see that at least two of the three agree?
yeah,
Like you could get rid of hallucinations if you asked three independent, chats what they thought of something. It would, and if all three of them say that the guy, earned an award in 1950, it's true. Whereas if only one of them says it, he might have made it up. I don't
yeah.
know why we aren't doing more challenging with all the compute power. Like with your brother, it should have been like three different scoring models. One on the face, one
Exactly.
on the background, one on the travel history and credit card. And if the two of the three said, let him go, anyway, we can't solve it, but I'm really stunned that we worry about hallucination, but we never think of asking for a second opinion.
Yeah, it's really worrying, and I think it reminds me of something that was a big problem here in the UK. It took the media by storm, and rightly so, because of to the point you're saying, it's slightly different, but the whole issue of debanking, like it's a problem that happened here in the UK,
Yeah.
and I know it's happened in America, and I'm sure it's happened elsewhere worldwide. Mark Andreessen talks about it with his startups that got debanked, and it's the end game. Like, it's nothing. Once you're past that point, you're not. It can collapse you overnight. And I mean, debanking someone because they have different opinions or different views. It happened to Nigel Farage. That is a big ethical concern. Whether you like that person or dislike that person, you can't shut down someone's livelihood, like access to living, because they have a different viewpoint to you. And I think that is not specifically with the banking, but there's loads of other things like healthcare insurance or travel or being able to leave the country or being able to get a mortgage, all these different things that, and you've seen it with job applications where
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
with
Yeah.
Google's model, was it, where it declined all women from the job. I don't want to say the name, I don't know who it was, but there was an
No, I know
example.
the case you're talking of. Yeah. I mean,
And
it's AWS
it's
also
just,
backed off using automated
yeah.
scanners. Yeah.
It's bizarre, and I think that is a real concern as we get bigger and as these technologies get more in line. But yeah, I just wanted to add that as well because that is stuff that has happened, um, and it's very well. There's something to keep an eye on as we progress these kind of technology.
So, with that in mind, what would you predict for the coming year and maybe for the next 5 years as being something that my viewers should watch out for?
Well, I think hardware is going to play a big role. The I think that how we communicate and the channels of communication, like I was saying it the other day, how if you look at how we communicated before the pandemic, I worked in businesses that had never heard of Slack, and I'd worked in businesses that had Teams, but we never really used it. And I
Yeah.
think now everyone's very familiar with it. We do it on planes, we use it at airports, we use it while on a train. We're much more agile in the way we communicate. And I speak to customers through Slack and I speak
Yeah.
to people through Teams, and it's just a given kind of we WhatsApp, whatever. And I think the communication channels that we communicate, now you can communicate, obviously, I think you were pointing to earlier, with like when you're in platforms itself, you can communicate within that platform to an LLM, and all of a sudden you can spend hours within a tool or within a platform because it just integrates, it syncs, it can do things. And I think that is going to be much more powerful over the next year. And I also think hardware is going to play a completely different role that people can't expect. With like Meta sunglasses, I think Apple's Vision
Yeah.
Pro was a bit of a flop, to be honest. But they're working out a lighter, smaller model, and they're working out glasses apparently. And there's loads of others that are working out similar products. There's a Chinese company doing amazing things. But those kind of things, I think they'll get adopted fairly quickly because of, and it might not be them, it might be enhanced watches. I don't know, but there'll be something, some form of hardware, like we use laptops, that will come in as a next step to really enhance it all. And I mean, the power you can get within like a AMD powered laptop, or it's crazy. Like the processing power you can get. And I think people, if I could be in a conversation with you gents over dinner and have my glasses on, and all of a sudden I've got the AI feeding me exactly what we spoke about a year ago, exactly what that customer
Yeah.
wanted, exactly when their child's birthday was, so I can ask them what they did as a family day out, whatever, how their operation went, what happened, and I've got it just in my glasses, just feeding at me in a corner. The intelligence behind that is next
Yeah.
level. Like, yeah, and I think
Yeah,
that is a very
exactly.
real thing that's
I'm
coming in
looking
five
forward to
years.
that too. In
Yeah,
fact, I probably will buy the Meta glasses just because I want to be able
yeah,
to
dude.
record things when I'm on vacation, touch my
Yeah,
lens. Um, so that's yeah, so it'll become ubiquitous. The question of, what decides to tell you how it remembers the birthday and all that, should it throw in an advertisement? That's a different story. Well, thank you, Tom, for joining us. But thank you very much for joining. I appreciate this, and I hope it was worth your time. And I will talk to you later and call this to a close and stop the recording.